Hey there, Keepin It Rural listeners. This is producer Loren, just jumping in with a quick programming note. Today's episode will be split into two parts, with the second one dropping in a few weeks. That's all for me. Now tune in to part one of our conversation with Greg.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Keepin It Rural. We are really lucky to have Greg Bohrer with us. He serves as the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Walmart, which is cool. He's responsible for the strategy and implementation of Walmart.org's regenerative agriculture philanthropic portfolio and the Walmart Foundation's commitment, everyone listens a lot, to protect, restore, or more sustainably manage at least 50 million acres of land and 1 million square miles of ocean by 2030. And that's pretty cool because I don't think a lot of people think of Walmart and think of that. So prior to joining Walmart in 2020, I actually got to meet Greg in our Minnesota Ag and Rural Leadership Program. And Greg led the Agricultural Program and Environmental Initiative, which I was always very interested to learn more about back in Minnesota. And when he was there, he led a lot of initiatives with the Midwest Row Crop Collaborative. Greg started his career in the U.S. Senate following the agricultural and environmental policy. He actually worked for Senator Klobuchar's office, and he resides with his family in Rogers, Arkansas, where Walmart is headquartered. And he very much enjoys gardening, pottery, biking, and beer brewing in his spare time. I found this online. Is it true?
It is true. Yeah. As much spare time as I can manage.
Yes, which I'm sure you don't have a lot because you have children and all the things. All right, so Greg, it's so great to have you on the pod.
I have actually tried to build a pottery studio to create more spare time if possible. Yeah.
That's
There you
amazing.
go. Things
Yeah.
to aspire for.
Yes, that's right. So thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time with us. So first of all, Greg, tell us more about you. You seem like you've had a lot of really cool experiences in your life so far. Where did you grow up? And then how did you end up in Arkansas? Give us the roundabout.
Yeah, it was a roundabout. But I think the most important thing from that introduction is that I know Natasha, and Natasha is amazing. And I just was excited to be back in touch with her when she reached out. And this is great. So, yes, the roundabout. So, born in Wisconsin, lived for a time in Michigan, lived for a time in Ohio, moved to Illinois, followed jobs from my parents, and grew up mainly in Chicago. And my family is mostly from Northern Illinois with a little bit of Wisconsin mixed in. And so a lot of my summers were spent at a little small town in Northern Illinois called Oregon. It's on the shore, it's on the banks of the Rock River, which was one of the key reasons I got into this work, is actually canoeing down the Rock River and having experiences with my grandfather that were both in nature but also in agriculture. He had a feed store in a little town, and so he got to know a lot of the farmers around. And when I went and visited, I got to sit in and listen to those chats. So that was formative for me. But then when I was deciding where to go to college, I went to Minnesota. So I went to St. Olaf College in Minnesota. Yep. Environmental studies and political science. Had a lot of hopes of changing the world through policy at the time. And after that, I went out to DC. It was one of those classic, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll go to DC and figure it out. So packed up my small amount of belongings at the time into the back of a car, went out to DC with my college sweetheart, now wife, and basically walked around Capitol Hill and said, please give me a job. And they said, we will, but it will be a free job. So I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that's as good as I could do for right now. And so took a job with no paycheck for a bit, and then did good enough at the free job that they're like, hey, do you want to get paid? I was like, yes, I really do at this point.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I would like to get past my current diet of rice and beans. Thank you. That'd be great. So Senator Klobuchar hired me, worked the front desk for a while, answering phones, managing interns, like that kind of fun stuff, leading tours, which was actually one of the best parts of the whole thing. And then moved to the policy side as a legislative correspondent, where I got to work on natural resources, commerce, agriculture, transportation, a whole bunch of bundled things that kind of continued my passion for working in the environmental space. But actually through that was when I really got introduced to agriculture as its own kind of policy portfolio and issue area, and just fell in love with it. I had a mentor, Dave Frederickson, who was the former commissioner of agriculture, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, former head of the National Farmers Union, just an overall amazing human being.
Phenomenal man.
Yeah. I think we can all love on Dave Fredrickson just a little bit right now because he's so good. And he actually was really great at the time because I didn't know that much, and I would call him up and he would give me the time to explain the issues and really get me a little bit deeper into agriculture. And then about that time, that was after like the first few years of the Obama administration, I was like, I think it's time for me to go. Things were changing. The politics were changing really rapidly. And I decided that I didn't want to be in DC forever. Some people land in DC and they like really love it. And it's going to be the only thing that they do. But it wasn't for me. I liked it. It was really valuable, but I wanted to go back home to the Midwest. And so moved back to Minnesota. I kept working for the senator actually in her district office on the same issues, but just more as a liaison to the groups on those issues in the state. So I got to put faces to the names in some ways, right, for agriculture and those different constituencies. And then left to go start a program at Environmental Initiative, as Natasha said. So I started up their agriculture program, was the first hire working on agriculture. Loved it. Fun. I got to be at the intersection of business and government and nonprofits and academia and all that, bringing them all together in different ways. And then grew the program over a few years, added more staff, added more projects, and eventually got to know Walmart through that because I was working with supply chain companies, food, agriculture companies. And this position, they created it and they're like, hey, would you like to go make a shot at applying for it? And I didn't know it at the time, going back to the intro, I didn't know that it was going to be around that 50 million acre commitment, but they made that in the midst of the interviewing process. I was like, oh, I think I understand what this job is about now, which was great. I'd never been to Arkansas. I was in the middle of the pandemic. I took the job without ever having really been here. My wife, the first time she came to Arkansas was like, find a house, right? And that was like, it was a crazy experience, but it's been great. I love working here. The issues that I get to work on day in and day out are fantastic. And I get to continue to work in the system that I really care about, which is agriculture. And how does that interface with food? How does it interface with the environment? And really help to try and change the system to deliver better things.
So the most important question of your entire introduction is, when you started working for Walmart, did you know you were going to get paid, or was it one of those? Or was it like
you work for free for a while?
I am pleased to say that they do pay me. Yeah.
Kind of them.
That was kind of them. Continues to be nice. Yeah, and then I can do things like try and build a pottery studio, right? Like things that I do also care about on the side. So sometimes having money and being able to afford more than rice and beans is a big deal. So I'm glad that I'm at that point in my life, and I'm glad that I get to earn money while doing things that I care about, which I think is the dream of everybody, right? So
absolutely,
I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, as you should. I think it's really neat when you talk about how dynamic your experience has been. And we have visited with so many podcast guests who have a very direct line of where they're coming from and going to. I remember a cranberry farmer. She grew up in that area, knew all about him growing up, and then married right into it. Your experience was nothing like that. And when you talk about something like policy, specifically egg policy, some of the opportunities seem to be so limited to those that want to get involved in it. Can you give us an idea for kids interested or young adults who might be interested? How do you even go about getting involved? There's got to be more than just being a legislative page or running errands or doing something for free in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's a pretty typical story, though, to go out there, work for free, build a reputation, and get hired.
That's how you get your foot in the door, right?
Yeah, because if you're going out there and you're like, I'm a competent person, you should hire me. Like, they don't know that. The alternative example that you use of like somebody who like was raised in the cranberry farming world and then married into, they know that person, right? Like, you've built a reputation in that community. When you move out to DC, nobody knows you. Nobody has any idea of the kind of work that you can do. And so that like work for free thing, as unfortunate as it is and limiting for a lot of people, it's like you building your professional reputation for the first time. And sometimes you can get a foot in the door on things, but it's tough to get a job without having a job, as I think everybody has found when they first graduate. But at the same time, like, there's more jobs than just like the limited number of staff assistant positions or whatnot that are available on the Hill. When you think about policy, it's a pretty broad landscape, and you can affect policy and change through it through working on the Hill. You can get an internship in the administration. You can be working for one of the many trade groups or nonprofits that are based out there. Folks are a little shocked by how many ideas come from off the Hill onto the Hill, right? It's those trade groups, it's those nonprofits, it's those think tanks, it's like those we call them special interests, but there's just their interests in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you work for one of those organizations and you bring those ideas to Capitol Hill and you work to build those coalitions around it, you can get some stuff done through that too. So you can't really break the cycle of people needing to know you, but that's true, I think, for most professional career tracks. It's just like your reputation will precede you. And if you have a good one, people want you to be part of their team. So how you build that, you can build that in the state by getting to know the right people who can vouch for you back where you're from. Going back to our great friend Dave Frederickson, getting to know him is a great thing because he knows everybody, right? And then he can make the vouch for you of, no, Greg's competent and not that crazy. You should probably hire him. That's great. So think about that. Think about the people that are in your circles that can help you get that leg up. And I'd also like policy. The reason I left it is that I don't have the mentality for a rearguard action. I always want to see things getting better. I want to see things progressing and changing and moving. And that's not really the case now. It's twice the effort and half the payout for work in policy now. And so you have to be okay with the day on day in failure of your ideas and what you want to accomplish. If you're going to be successful, you have to be really okay with not just failing fast, but failing very often. And I struggle with that. That's why I do pottery, because then I can, if I fail on a piece, I can just mix it back together and then slap it back on the wheel and make another one. And that's how I deal with so it's like working through failure. But in a professional sense, like, you have to be able to do that in policy. So be realistic about whether you have that personality or not. It is a way to create. It's a great way to make change, but boy, you better be ready for the grind. It's real.
Yeah, and what a different way to look at it too, because I think so many kids especially, but there's a lot of adults in our world that when they think about policy, they just think about governmental arguments and fighting and all of the things that we see from the news.
Yeah.
You have shed light on how it's so much more than that too, but it really does take a very tough skin to deal with it.
It does. And if you're in it for the fight, go work on the campaigns. That's what a fight is, right? It's two sides, very clear actors, like two people want the same job and only one can get it. Like, that's clear. Go work on the campaigns and keep, if you have that sort of gene in you. I don't. If you want to see progress, if you want to see change, that only comes after the campaign, right? That only comes after, and you have to build coalitions. Nobody in Congress gets something done by themselves, except in the Senate when you can hold up things because you're a party of one. But most of the time, if you want to get something done, you have to actually be able to work with a lot of different people. And I was very fortunate. I worked for Klobuchar, who takes that very seriously. He's really good at identifying common ground issues that folks are like, yeah, that just needs to be solved, and then building legislation around that and doing something about it. That was fantastic because I was really aligned with my sort of personality and mentality, and I've been able to carry that forward into other jobs. But not always the case. There's other bosses out there that have a different view of what they're meant to do in Congress, and it's not as clear cut as I think it might be when you're first thinking, I'm going to make a change, I'm going to go out to DC, I'm going to get a job on Capitol Hill, and I'm going to see all my dreams and ideas come true. No, that's not really how it goes. Sorry.
That's not really how it goes. I think you make a really good point in just the building of your network, right? That's such a huge part of anybody's success. And that's something that I take really seriously because I'm not the smartest kid and I'm probably not the best for a lot of jobs, but man, I have a network like Greg who thinks I'm amazing. So it's all about being with people and letting them get to know what you have to offer, right?
Yeah.
And then finding the right fit.
Yeah, and finding the right fit. I think that's such a good point. And I met Greg through the Minnesota Ag and Rural Leadership Program. And there's these kind of programs all over the country, but these are great ways to build your network. And I remember when our class got together, I felt like I was very networked in agriculture. And I walked into that first day of our 30 people in our class and I like knew 2 people. I was like, oh my gosh, I like know nobody and these people don't know me. And that was really eye-opening to me from coming from the agricultural education kind of world where everybody knows everybody, just to be like, I really don't actually know that many people. So I think it's so important to take those opportunities to build your network. 2 things I remember about Greg. One is he is the snazziest dresser and has really cool socks. For real. This is true, correct?
I can even see that with the 8 inches of his.
Oh gosh,
He's super
Natasha,
tall
I didn't
and a
wear my
snazzy
buckle.
dresser.
Show
I have
us your socks.
I do have I have
That's
bacon and
so
egg socks
sad.
on.
I asked permission to bring this up because I wasn't sure if I could, but his dad invented the hot pocket sleeve and the bag that you make microwave popcorn in. So I mean, he's like famous and stuff. You all know it.
I was
Like this
very
is a big
cool at
deal.
school. Yeah, parents come to school day and they talk about the professions, and it's usually like the policeman and the
Yeah.
firefighter. They're everybody, ooh, you have a cool job. My dad was like, snacks for everyone, and it was like, yeah, that's my dad.
I bet you were so popular. Like that kid has the coolest dad.
Yeah,
Like never ending
popular.
supply of microwave popcorn and hot pockets.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
or you were heavily.
That's great. Anyways, yes, we digress so fast. Okay, so my question is, it was clear to me after I got to know you, Greg, that you're really passionate about sustainable agriculture and the care of the environment. And we had some really good conversations over the couple years we were together in that program. And the one thing I always really appreciated about you is that a lot of people look at environmentalists and that they don't want agriculture, which may be true in some people's opinions, but not in yours. So I always really appreciated your way to look at both sides of that. So if you could talk a little bit more about how you define sustainable agriculture, and then what are the variables you are finding to be advantages and disadvantages in your work with working with farmers to find sustainable food? What are those epiphanies you've had?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And going back to like when we met, the thing about Marl is it's 30 people, right? And 2/3 of them are farmers. So I walked into that room as like an environmentalist and I'm working at a nonprofit. I was like, hey everybody, how's it going? And
Kind of like,
Yeah, wanna be
hey, my
friends?
dad invented the sleeve of the hot pocket. Look at me.
yeah, like that first getting together was like a little treacherous, I'll be honest. And I think over the course of 2 years I proved myself and I was like not the odd one
Yep.
out. But it really was because of my approach to this, right? You asked what the definition of sustainable agriculture is, and there's sustainable agriculture, there's conservation agriculture, regenerative agriculture, smart agriculture. They're all the same thing in my brain. Everybody gets hung up on definitions, and I think about things in terms of principles, right? Which is take care of the natural resources that are the foundation of the agricultural system, which is in turn the foundation of our society. Okay, just full stop, right? If we just think about
I
it in
like that definition.
right, it's just it makes sense, right? Agriculture is not an enemy. Agriculture is the way we live, right? That's just basic stuff. You guys remember the book Guns, Germs, and Steel? Do you remember that? Way back when,
No.
by this guy named Jared Diamond. It was a big book. It was a big deal. But then he had a follow-up book that was called Collapse: How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. Basically, a set of in-depth case studies on things like the Mayans and others, like the other big societies that span entire regions, across countries, and things like that, and then just went poof overnight. Right, like they just fell apart. And it's a really important book for me because it's foundational to when I think of the sustainable agriculture. Like the main thing that he found was the societies that failed, that chose to fail, were the ones who overextended themselves on their natural resources. Like they didn't have enough water, they depleted and exhausted their soils, and eventually the whole system that was constructed on top of that just went boom. And the empires would fall apart. A lot of like cities would get abandoned, right? Like the whole thing. And I say this, and it's not like earth-shattering news, right? Like if you can't feed people, stuff tends to fall apart real fast. But that's what I'm trying to do, is that sustainable agriculture to me, or regenerative agriculture to me, is like taking care of the soil, the water, and the ecosystem that agriculture is in. And if we do that, we will be able to maintain our society and also our planet for the next generations to come. And that's all I'm really about. And farmers are the ones who are going to do it, right? Farmers are the ones who have the control and the management of the resource. They understand it. They may have been on that same land for generations. All we're trying to do is equip them in a new way to be a steward of that resource. And so the new way is like a mentality shift. There's the principles of soil health, which I think are really helpful. But it's basically like building back a function where the farmer is the keystone species. Like we were joking that I'm using a background for my Zoom today and we've got a bison in it. That's a keystone species. It flips everything around it, right? And that's what the farmer is on a farm. So if you think about it, Like the farmer is managing the soil ecology, those microbes, the fungi, all the creepy crawly stuff that's in the soil that actually can unlock the nutrients in the soil for the plants to then use and grow nice and big and produce really nice crops. You can force it, right, by having a lot of inputs that you bring in from off farm. You could add a lot of nutrients if it's not there, but soils naturally feed themselves and feed plants. And so if we can just put the farmer in the role of being an ecosystem engineer rather than a mechanical and chemical engineer, they're going to be super successful. And the research shows that out, right? Like when you adopt these soil health practices, farmers are more profitable, they're more resilient, right? Because the water's not always there. And sometimes you get a drought, sometimes you get severe weather, and healthy soils are like, research is showing time and time again, that's the way to weather it. That's the way to get through it so that you don't have just a full loss on your hands. And so, yeah, you get 6 inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains, and that's what civilization is based off of. And so just taking care of that is my definition of sustainable agriculture. And I don't think it's actually that different than farmers. So as long as you come at it from that agriculture as part of the solution, and agriculture has a meaningful role to play, and farmers are stewards of the land and our resources that we depend on at a society level, I don't think there's much disagreement, honestly.
Greg, that was like such a peaceful definition. And like
I
was like, oh, that was like
so
poetic.
peaceful.
Yeah. So why is it not poetic in real life? In your mind, you are someone that deals with this every day. Why is it not that beautiful, peaceful, poetic?
The day-to-day, these things are difficult to do because it takes time, right? You're adding complexity, and farmers, I know, are pressed for time. They work so hard, and then you're like, now do this thing that's going to be even more complex than the thing that you're already going to do, and you don't have a background in it. Okay, that's a lift, right? So you're adding time and complexity, and that's already a thing. And then you're also, when you make a shift in your farming practices or your ranching practices, often that comes with a shift in cost, right? Maybe you need to buy new equipment, or you're buying, instead of spending as much on fertilizer, you're now spending on cover crops or something like that, right? There's usually a cost involved with transitioning practices. And farming is not a high margin business. These are difficult things to ask somebody who is running a business that supports their family livelihood on. And so you need to be able to support them in that, provide incentives, provide some financial support. And then the third piece that you have to be able to do is provide them sort of the change management. What I mean by that is farmers have agronomists and technical advisors and like people that help them. Everybody from the banker to the BCA to the sales agronomist at the local co-op. They have tons of people that like they talk to and help them through it. But if you don't have somebody to call when you're like, what is my seeding rate for cover crops with ryegrass and a mix of daikon radish? Who do you call with that question? It might not be the same people that you're used to calling. So unless you have a support network and people who are like, yeah, last year I tried this, you might try this too. Or actually, I would dial it up just a little bit because I feel like it was a little sparse in the field last year. Whatever. Somebody who is able to, from their experience, help to troubleshoot and sort problems, that's really helpful. So those three things, right? You need to recognize that it's going to be more complex in some ways. And that complexity goes down over time as you learn it. But it's certainly at the beginning. You need to have the financial incentives in place because you're sharing the risk of the transition on a business. And then third, you need to provide somebody who's going to be able to pick up the phone when somebody calls and says, I'm not sure what to do in this moment. Like I tried to install a dishwasher yesterday to guys, and like the instructions were terrible. And it was the most frustrating thing. And I just wanted to pick up the phone and call somebody and be like, does this part go here? Because the instructions are very unclear. And on a macro level, on a farm, that's like a big thing. So it's human nature to need that. And I don't think the solutions are magic here. It's just recognize that there's some very real practical barriers to making changes on farms, and then make those barriers go away if you can. That's what my job is, working through the supply chain, working through philanthropy, whatever it is, make that as easy as possible for the farmer to lean into the thing that they naturally want to do, which is take care of the land. So there's other reasons why it's hard, right? Like I boil it down to those three, but I think that it's also very manageable if you surround things with the right stuff, with the right resources. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, what a good way to look at it too. I just appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that you like acknowledge for the farmers that it is complex. I think that's sometimes where we lose them, is that they're like, they don't get how difficult this is going to be for me. This is not just changing what I do. It's not just
Right.
right. It's important that they know that experts think that too, and that there's help available. I grew up being a dairy princess and doing all of the advocacy things, and we always talk about bridging the gap. And
Greg, Becca was Princess K of the Milky Way.
Were you like
I know.
like from
She's
like
famous.
statewide or like what county?
Like,
Just
yes,
dial it.
No, state. Princess K of the Milky Way.
Why am I not interviewing you?
It's
That's
amazing.
way. I don't get why I'm sitting on this side
Hey,
of the
she's my
microphone.
friend. Like, I'm the luckiest one in this whole trio because you are both my friends and you are both like really cool.
But
How
like,
lucky am I?
I'm gonna go brag about this to my colleagues, and they're gonna have no idea.
right. Oh yeah. They'd be like,
You
what?
gotta Find her online. But Becca, you can send him the picture when you were crowned and then he can show everyone.
Yeah.
Because
It
it's
is
the
the best
greatest
one of all
Princess
time.
K picture ever. It is, for real. The best
Okay, I
picture
would
of all
like. Yeah.
time.
Okay. So yes, absolutely. The picture of the crowning and the coronation. But also, do you have a picture of the butterhead?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, I would like that part too.
You need to
You
send
got
it. Yes.
Because I bet you at least $10 that you say Princess K and they think you're talking about Mary Kay makeup. So that happens a lot when you talk to non-Minnesotans.
What's actually probably going to happen is they're going. Do you mean like the candy bar?
Yeah, that happens too.
Because we sell a lot of those, right? And so
The number one gift that I got from fans was Milky Way candy.
Oh, that makes
Was
sense.
the Milky Way candy?
Yeah.
That is great.
I'm
So I'm so sorry that I interrupted you, Becca. I had to
We were just talking about how we digress so fast.
This is a good one. I like this one.
Great, so fun. This is gonna have to be a two-part, I think.
Yay! I love twofers.
We still have so many things to ask you.
It's not a party without you there. Follow our crazy on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to check out all episodes and extras at keepinitruralgirls.com.
Until next time, keep it rural.
It's time to pour on the fire and call in the dogs. That's all, folks.